So welcome to the Profitable Franchisees podcast. I'm Tracey Leak, your host. This podcast is all about bringing powerful strategies and stories to help you build a more successful and profitable franchise. So I'm really excited in this second season to kick off. We've actually got Dan Cahill here from Jim's Mowing. I actually met Dan at, it was the Melbourne Franchising Expo earlier this year. Dan was there exhibiting. I think we're also on the Franchisee Success Panel. We've been talking throughout the day. I was emceeing the seminar stage. And at the end of the day, we always do this Q&A to just talk to a few of the exhibitors there to do it. And because I'd heard Dan's story throughout the day, I just yelled out to Dan from stage, "Hey, Dan, get up here." So I had a totally impromptu interview with me, but Dan's got this most amazing story that's why I asked him. I've given you a bit more notice this time, Dan. I didn't just call you up. But Dan's got an amazing story about how he got into franchising, and it's something that I think that you can all learn from, and that's why I invited Dan here. So welcome, Dan. What I want to start with is just tell us your story. It's such an amazing story about what was happening before you joined Jim's as a franchisee in their mowing division. Tell us about what was happening in life and how you actually got started in your business.
So I was working at McDonald's before I was at Jim's Mowing, and I started from a crew person and, slowly worked my way up through the ranks to get to, manager and restaurant manager and that. The issue with working at McDonald's is I was doing very, very long hours. So we were getting paid salary. So it would be a standard 40-hour week that would get paid for. But a lot of weeks I was working 80 or 70 or 90-hour weeks. And we had our, me and my wife, so my wife also worked at McDonald's as well. And we had our little daughter, Isla, who was about 2 years old at the time. And me and her just, one day we sat down and we just said, this isn't working out. Like, we're not spending any time with our daughter. We don't have any spare money because, we're not getting paid enough. And, our mortgage and our bills and our finance and credit cards and everything was just sort of getting backed up. And I went, right, well, I've got to make a change and I've got to do something to be able to improve my family's lifestyle. And so we started looking into the Jim's Mowing business. We looked at a whole bunch of other businesses as well, but the Jim's Mowing one really clicked with me. And I think the reason it clicked was because I'm certainly not the sharpest tool in the shed. So I was expelled from my first high school and dropped out of another high school as well. And I like the idea of the lawn mowing business because it seemed to be simple enough for me to be able to succeed in. And the thought process that I had was, if I mow a lot of lawns, I'll make a lot of money. And I sort of just had that sort of idea of, as long as I'm mowing a lot of lawns, it's going to work out. And that's what sort of followed me through the whole way. So, but that's what I was doing before I started up with Jim's Mowing.
So tell us about, getting in, because it wasn't just like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this and let's get started. You had to ask some tough questions of people around you to help you out to get started. So what did that look like in that process of actually putting your money on the line?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, so I really wanted to do it, but I didn't have any money to be able to do it. So what I did was I begged my wife to go and ask her mum, because my mother-in-law, for the money to be able to buy the business, because I had to sit down with the franchisor at the time, and it all seemed pretty good to me, and they had a weekly guarantee, which sounded fantastic. And I actually got my wife to ask her mum, and sure enough, she said yes to it. And that's sort of what got our foot in the door. And because I was, I suppose, playing with someone else's money, I took it very, very seriously, because I sort of had everything on the line. I mean, I'd quit my job, and I had a mortgage that I could barely afford, which was $1,000 a week, and I've now taken on money from family, and it just gave me this, I don't know what it is, but it was like a permanent adrenaline rush to make sure that I was definitely going to succeed, and I was going to do whatever it took. And I actually worked 7 days a week when I first started for about a year and a half straight. So I'm glad it worked out that way, though.
I think that's a bit of a myth people have coming into business. They think that becoming your own boss means that you can work whenever you want, and it's this idea of freedom. Whereas I often say to people, the first 2 years in your business will actually determine your success. You know, you don't have work-life balance in the first 2 years of your business if you want it to be successful long term. And you're proof of that. There's one thing I always say to people: I can't teach people work ethic. You either have it or you don't. And clearly you have a whole stack of work ethic. So tell us about those early days in your business. Like I remember you telling me, like, you knew you could start at 7, so you were there ready to go at 7. Like, what were you doing to fill your book with clients so that you could build up your business, and what did that look like?
Okay. So I suppose I should probably start off with, I never liked the idea of working the ridiculous hours that I was working. In fact, if I had a choice of sitting down on the couch and watching Netflix all day, I'd rather do that all day, every day. Like it's not like I have an obsession with work. It was more so I had an obsession with making sure that I could provide for my kids and my family. Mm-hmm. And so that was really my main driver. But yeah, I started at, every morning I'd start the brush cutter at 7 a.m. at the first customer's house when I first started. So this is going back about 7 years ago now. And so I would wake up at 6 o'clock and I would, have my morning coffee, and I had my own little routine that I was sort of in, and I would get in the car and go to the first job, and I'd always get to the first job at about 6:55, and I'd sit there waiting for it to tick over to 7 o'clock, because you can't start lawn mowing until 7 o'clock. And as soon as it would hit 7 o'clock, sure enough, I would start the brush cutter up and start getting stuck into the front nature strip and working my way around the property. The issue is that obviously starting that early, you get a few neighbours that aren't very happy with hearing, a two-stroke engine or a lawnmower running at that time. So I did get abused quite a few times, but I think I just learnt which houses I could get away with it with and which ones I couldn't. So, but yeah, I would start work at 7 a.m., but I would also I worked long days. So when I first started, I was working like 7 till 7 pretty much. So I would only stop mowing once I couldn't see the lawn that I was actually mowing, when it was too dark. I think it was because I was so nervous, and I suppose I was so anxious about making sure that this worked, because everything was on the line, and I didn't really have much to fall back on, because, if this didn't work out, I didn't have a skill set or any qualifications to be able to get me a job or land me a job that was going to be enough pay to keep the home and, to keep paying the bills and the rest of it. So it really was, I needed to make it work.
The funny thing is, I know the end to this story. So, here it sounds like you're just working hard just to make a living, but tell us what your business turned into. That was the starting days where you were making sure, and I love hearing that you were making sure you were providing for your family and making sure you were paying that money back that you borrowed. But tell us about the growth of your business and where it actually ended up and how you built it to that level.
Yeah, no worries. So when I first started, I was doing, in a lawn mowing business, you build up what we call mowing rounds. And so you have these regular clients that you do on a usually a 2-week basis. And so you'll put them on your schedule, and then every 2 weeks you go out and you have a whole bunch of customers in one suburb, and you'll do them every second Monday, and then you have a whole bunch of customers in another suburb. And so that's sort of the end goal. But when I first started, it probably wasn't that well known. It wasn't explained that well. So I was taking on a lot of once-off work. So I was doing these great big garden cleanups and lawn mowing jobs where it was knee high, and hedge reductions and chainsawing and all this crazy sort of stuff. And the benefit of doing that sort of work was that I was getting paid, I suppose, a lot more for those types of jobs than what I would for a standard regular lawn mowing job. But it was because I was working so hard. And so I actually had, I should probably mention this, but I had a bit of a burnout about 18 months in, and I actually went through depression and everything for about 3 months. So, which I probably don't speak about too much, but it was because I'd worked myself so hard for so long, and I didn't have much of a social life either, because I just put everything into work. And so it was at that point where I went, you know what, I've got to change the structure of this business. I've got to make a change, and I've got to make it work. And what I did was I decided that I was going to create my business based around these regular mowing rounds. And so what I did was I'd bring on these regular customers, and I would make sure that every day we had $700 worth of work from the regular lawn mowing customers. And most lawn mowing customers are worth about $80. So if you do, eight jobs and a couple of extra sales at each person's house, then you're going to make your $700 per day. And so I built that up, and every week I'd have about $3,500 worth of work from this mowing round. And then what I did was I hired my younger brother, and I said, hey, I'm going to teach you how to mow, I'm going to teach you how to brush cut and blow and all the rest of it. And I paid him roughly about $1,500 a week or so, and he would make me $3,500 a week from this mowing round. And then because that worked out so well and I was making a really good profit on it, I went, well, maybe this is how I grow my business. Maybe this is what I focus on. And so what I would do is I'd continue to build these mowing rounds and bring on more and more regular lawn mowing customers, because I no longer liked doing the big once-off garden cleanups and, the jobs that were just, really out of shape. And I wanted to do the easier jobs. And it was because I went through that tough time. So I would build up a new mowing round probably within 6 months. And while I was building it up, I'd take on the once-off work again. And then, after a while, I'd have a mowing round built up, and then I'd hire an employee. And so sure enough, it got to the point where I'd put on a new full-time employee every 6 months that would make me $3,500 per week, and I'd pay them $1,500 a week. And so within 3 years, naturally, I had 6 full-time employees, each looking after a mowing round, each making me $3,500 per week each. So my business was making over $20,000 a week, and it didn't actually seem that difficult. It was more so I had a routine and I had a system in place, and it just, as long as I kept on doing that, it would work.
So when you actually add that up, 50 weeks by 20,000, that's like $1 million business, is it not?
It was a pretty good business. So the issue is that I was constantly building the business up. So I was a franchisee for about 3.5 years. So I never hit that $1 million mark. It would have been very nice if I did, but I didn't. And it was because I was still building my mowing rounds even in that third year. And then obviously, you have a few setbacks. So you might have employees that call in sick or might leave, and you need to replace them. So, but yeah, I wish I had. I think the closest I got was roughly about 850. So, but there's been plenty of franchisees that will have hit over $1 million a year, and it's usually from doing a very similar system to that.
The funny thing is I think a lot of people from the outside would look and go, "Oh, you're probably going to make yourself, the equivalent of a job. Like you're going to buy yourself a job and you're going to make, somewhere between 50, 70,000 a year," and not realize that if you actually put the work in and how you actually built it is a really smart way of building it. It's actually a business that's called a modular model of how you're building it. So whether or not you knew the technical term for it, but
no, I didn't. I had no idea.
There you go. I teach people that. So, you did it naturally. And that's what I always love is when you talk to people who don't realize that they're actually doing things really well. You've said a couple of things in there that I just really want to highlight. One, that I was actually reading a stat yesterday that 50% of Australians will suffer from some type of depression within their life. And within the last 12 months, 20% of Australians have had some form of depression. And I'm really proud that you actually mentioned that, because it's something that people don't talk about, especially in male trade-based type businesses. There's a big movement for that, and it's a natural thing to happen. But the good that can come from that, you look at it and you go, that was a snapshot where you went, things have to be different.
Well, it forced me to change, because otherwise I would have sold the business. I would have gotten rid of it because I couldn't continue on the way I was going.
The other thing that you did really well that I just want to highlight for everyone else is that you broke it down into a small bite-sized piece. I always say to people, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. And you got down to $700 a day. And that's such a thing. The reason I'm pulling these out is this: when people are listening to this, to hear that success leaves clues. And these are the clues that you're actually leaving of the things that you did, having that resilience to get up, saying, hey, things have to change. Sometimes we don't look at it and go, hey, this needs to change. So when we go from that, there is a second part to your story, and you sort of alluded to that. You said, I was a franchisee for 3.5 years. Tell us about what happened next, because, I was at the Franchising Expo. I was talking to Jim Penman about you, and the things that he was saying about you were amazing. And Jim doesn't, give credit very often, or, he doesn't sing people's praises without, evidence that it's true. And he was saying the nicest things about you. So tell us about your journey from franchisee into the land of franchisor.
Yeah, no worries. So it was never really something that I ever envisioned myself doing. And I suppose it was because the idea of being a franchisor seemed like something that I wasn't capable of doing. I just didn't feel like I was smart enough. And I knew the reason for my success in my business was because of the amount of hard work and dedication that I had put into it. And it was a physical job. So as long as I was physically capable, I was going to make that work, because I would work as much as I possibly needed to. And so the idea of going into franchisor, it was actually Jim's idea. So he came to me one day, because I'd done a podcast with him, a couple of years before that. And he came to me and he was congratulating me on being the first franchisee to reach 500 5-star reviews. Jim has the customers review all the franchisees. And so I'd become very, I suppose, dedicated to being the first person to hit 500, because no one had done it yet. And it was a way for me to be able to motivate my employees to work better throughout the day and give better customer service. And it's because I learned that the better your service is while you're doing the job, the more customers you're going to have, and the easier it will be to run the business. People didn't necessarily use me in my business because we were the best at mowing lawns. I think they used us because we had good communication and good customer service, because there's a certain aspect where customers are out at work when you're mowing their lawns, and they're letting someone into their backyard, into their home, while they're not there. And so there's that trust that they have for people, and that's a big part of why they choose the people they do for the services. And so because I was focused on being the best person for the job, and I wanted my employees to do that, I went, well, how do I do this? And I knew that 500 5-star reviews was something that would probably motivate me and my team to make sure that we gave the best service possible to our customers. And Jim, he congratulated me, and he said to me, he goes, I think it's time for you to become a franchisor. You should really consider buying a region or buying a part of Jim's Mowing, because franchisors, they own certain areas of Jim's Mowing within Australia. So you'll have people that'll own, like, one council area, or, a third of a state, or whatever it is. And depending on how big the area is and how many franchisees is how much it costs to buy in. And I was pretty nervous about the idea, but then I spoke to my wife, and she said that she would take care of most of the bookwork and the documents and the compliance stuff, because I'm not sure how I landed my wife. I'm really not, because she's extremely smart and very, very switched on. So I think I just got very lucky there. But so she said that she would take care of most of that stuff for me. And I was like, all right, well, then I can be the face of it, and I can just teach franchisees and coach franchisees on how to do the job. Because before that, the franchisor role sort of seemed like someone that sort of governed the rules of the franchise agreement and just made sure that franchisees did as they were supposed to keep the reputation of the business where it needed to be. But then, because I suppose I didn't really have that skill set, my skill set was more so coaching. So I went, well, the way that I see a franchisor is I'm going to be a coach to these people, and I'm going to help them improve their business. And I started looking at businesses. I looked at my area that I lived in actually was up for sale, which is around the Frankston area in Victoria. And I spoke to him about it, and it seemed like a pretty good deal. And then there was another one in southeast Melbourne that was also available, and I spoke with him about it. It seemed pretty reasonable as well. And then I found out about, it hadn't hit the market yet, but I found out about Jim's Mowing Brisbane was going up for sale, and the franchisor region, and it hadn't hit the market yet, and they just started talking about it. And I remember Jim said, you might want to take a bit of a look into this one. And so I looked into it, and I was like, well, how am I going to run a region from another state? And I said, it's probably not possible. Like, I'm going to have to move there. But the potential of this area seemed so good that I was like, I can't really pass this up. Like, this is like, pretty much twice as good as what the ones in Victoria were. And so I went, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And so I bought this Jim's Mowing Brisbane region area. The issue is that I didn't have enough money saved up to be able to buy it outright, because it costs roughly about $1 million. And so I had about half of that. And so I spoke with Jim and I said, Jim, would you be interested in loaning me the other half of the money and I'll pay you back? And he said, absolutely not. And I was like, all right, no worries. And then I go, well, I'm struggling to get the money from the bank because it's a bit harder to get loans from the bank when you have your own business.
Yep.
And I said, would you be interested in having a 50% ownership then? Because I was like, well, I'm not going to let this slip. And Jim said, well, I've never done that before. I've never been a partner with any other franchisor before. But given our relationship and what I've seen you do as a franchisee, I'd give it a shot with you. Yeah, I'd be interested. And so that was sort of what all started it off. So me and Jim bought this Brisbane area together from this lovely couple that had owned it for about 32 years. And the potential was there was so much work there and nowhere near enough franchisees to be able to cover the amount of work that it was going to be very easy to be able to retain the franchisees, because when people have plenty of work, they're not going to go anywhere. And also bring new franchisees on, because there was heaps of potential to be able to get these other franchisees to fill a mowing round very, very quickly. And so that's sort of how it all played out. Did you want me to go into it a bit deeper as well, or?
If you want to, yeah. I'm loving hearing this story. I'm loving the fact that you're willing to ask and finding a way to make things happen. I'm laughing as well that, you started off by saying I had to go to my mother-in-law to get money. Now you're in a position where you had $500,000 to invest in a business. Like, have you ever stopped and thought about that period of 3.5 years of going where you were working at Macca's and you had to ask for the money to get started in the franchise, because it's not a high-cost franchise to get into, but then you got to a stage where you could actually start looking at a franchise or territory. Do you realise what you've done, Dan?
Yeah, I suppose I probably don't spend enough time looking back at what it is that I've done. And I think it's just because every day I just work and I'm always looking forward to the next thing that, I can improve on. But yeah, it is, I think it's because my wife and I really knew the value of a dollar, because before that we were actually struggling financially pretty seriously because of all the debts that we were in. So most nights we were having 2-minute noodles and soup for dinner to be able to get by, and then getting into a position where, we were making fantastic money. I think me and Mel just sort of naturally just felt like something's going to go wrong. Murphy's Law. Whatever can go wrong in our life will go wrong. So we're just going to save it for a rainy day. So we just saved and saved and saved. And yeah, it turned out that, I was in a position where we could afford it. So it was probably more so my wife that's the really good saver. She tends to almost, it's like she gives me pocket money every week almost. So
Well, it's working for you, so you keep doing that.
Yeah, that's it.
What do you think's been your key when, as the franchisor working, like when you took on that Brisbane territory? Maybe you should tell everyone how many territories you actually have now, because it's not just that Brisbane territory. Like, you sent me through yesterday the map of your territories, and I'm like, holy moly, because you have a lot more than just that now, don't you?
Yeah, I do. So I bought that area in 2021, and I started running it, and we started selling franchises. And I don't know if I was the best. I didn't know if I was the best person to be able to sell them, because my issue was that every time I'd sell a business, it had to be over the phone because I didn't live in that state. And I'm terribly unorganized. So I'd try and organize like a Zoom meeting for these people to sell a business to them, because that's what, someone in my role as an area manager would do. But then I'd just completely forget about the Zoom meeting that I've organized with people, and they'd be sitting there waiting for me, and I just wouldn't arrive because I forgot about it. And so I was like, this isn't going to work. I can't book it in like this. I just have to speak to them over the phone. And so I think because I had quite a fair bit of experience in the industry by that point, I obviously had quite a fair bit of confidence in it because of the experience that I had. I think the people that I was talking to about the business, they could relate with me, because I'd tell them a bit about my story, and then they'd go, oh my God, I'm in a similar position. Maybe this is right for us. And so because I was always very, I always knew from when I ran my franchise that the most important thing is the actual time frame of when you get back to a customer, because the first impression means everything. And if you get that first impression wrong, it's almost like game over. And so as soon as I had a franchise inquiry come through, I would call them straight away. So I'd usually call them within 5 minutes, no worries at all. And so people had a better perception of me. the brand because of that. And then I was able to talk to them about it, and sure enough, they'd buy these businesses. And I think it was like my very first year in, I sold 53 franchises the first year of being a franchisor, and we still had plenty of work, which was fantastic. And I was like, it's going great. It was actually about 6 months in that Jim asked me, because we were selling so many, I was probably at somewhere around 25 or something by this point, but Jim had asked me if I was interested in buying North Queensland, which ran from Cairns down to Mackay. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'd be interested in that. And he said, well, you can do it, but only if you do it with me as a 50% partner again. And so he wanted to buy it off this other lovely couple that owned it. But he didn't want to have it by himself, because his businesses that he owned by himself weren't doing as well as the ones that I had, that he was with me. So he said, all right, well, let's do it. We're going to be 50-50 again. Otherwise you won't get the opportunity to buy it, and I'll just buy it myself. And I'm, all right, we'll do it again. And so, I bought this area, and we just kept on selling franchises, and I kept on coaching up the existing franchisees in those area, and, holding on to the franchisees and making sure they were, very happy with how the brand and how the franchise was running. And sure enough, before long, my next opportunity came available. And I'd actually made this opportunity come available to me because there was an issue where I couldn't change I hit a roadblock. I couldn't change the cost of the franchise fees for the franchisees, because it became very confusing. You've got a whole bunch of different like advertising costs and call center costs and coaches costs and all the rest of it. And it would just come to this random number of like, I don't know, $832.42 or something silly like that. And no one could really understand what it all meant. And I said, well, Jim, I really want to change this to just exactly $800 per month. And he said, well, you can't unless you get all the franchisors in that state to approve of it. And I went, all right, well, what if I buy my own state? And he said, well, you could do it if you did that. And I went, right, well, let's do that, Jim. I said, Jim, would you like to buy Northern Territory with me? And that was because Northern Territory was the cheapest state at the time, because I only had one franchisee in it. And yeah, but sure enough, me and Jim went and bought Northern Territory together. And so I then had free roam of being able to change the franchise agreement to the cost that I wanted to, and change the lead fees to exactly $10 each and all the rest of it. And we ended up a little while, probably 6 months after that, Jim came to me again and he said, would you be interested in expanding into New South Wales? And I said, you know what, let's do it. So we bought 2 regions in New South Wales together, so which was central New South Wales and southern New South Wales, which is like from Bega up to Nowra and over to Bathurst and Dubbo and Broken Hill. And then, yeah, sure enough, another 6 months after that, Jim had come to me and he said, hey, would you be interested in buying central Queensland now, which was from Rockhampton down to about the Sunshine Coast. So if about Twin Waters or Coolum Beach sort of area. So it included like Noosa and all those sorts of areas. And so I bought that as well, because we were making great money, because obviously, we're keeping franchisees on, they're paying their franchise fees, I'm making all these sales. And I think we average about 70 sales a year at the moment. But that's because I'm pretty careful with where I put franchisees. I don't want to put too many in one area at one time. And so that's sort of how it all grew to get to where we are now. So yeah, it's been a journey.
This is people talk about great Australian stories of success, and you're clear to that. I mean, when I was at the Franchising Expo, Jim was actually giving the keynote, and Jim and I were talking. And he said, I shouldn't be giving the keynote. It should be Dan up there, talking about it. And it's, and I didn't even know you guys were in 50-50 partnership. But when you're, we need to finish up in a minute, but when you're working with franchisees, what's sort of the key message you give to them to help them be more successful? Because the difference that you've got is that you've actually done it as well. Like, you've come in at a franchisor level, but you were a franchisee. So when you're training up a new franchisee or even your existing franchisees, what's the key message that you always try to get across to them to help them be more successful?
So my first one is I believe business is about creating high demand. If you have high demand, then you have more control over your business. It's a bit of a numbers game. And so if you've got more and more clients on, then you have freedom to be able to choose your own prices, because you're not desperate to hold on to these clients as much. Where, let's say you've only got 30 regular clients in your business, you're going to be sort of desperate to just keep them all, because you need to be able to keep food on the table and a roof over your head. Where if you continue to create high demand, so you continue to go out there and do marketing and take on all the work you possibly can and create different revenue streams within the business, then it means that you'll eventually get to the point where you've got 40 hours of work a week, and any more customers that come through and get referred to you, well, you don't really have time to do them. So you're naturally going to charge a higher price, because, well, that's eating into your personal time now. And so when you get to that point, is that it's really, really, I suppose, empowering, because you now go, well, actually, I know I'm worth more, and I've got the capability to charge more, because if you say no, I'm not affected. So I would say creating high demand by doing local area marketing and just taking on work from any stream available would be one of the most important things about running a business. And the other one is, I really think it's important to have a set routine. A lot of franchisees that I see, the struggles they have isn't necessarily anything with the franchise system or their own business or whatever it is. It's usually because they will wake up late. So because they have their own business, they don't have a boss telling them what time they need to wake up and what time they need to be at work. So they'll wake up late, they'll take it easy, they'll have their breakfast, spend time relaxing on the couch, whatever it is they're doing. And then they start work at, like, let's say 9:30. And then they finish late because they've started late. And so they finish late, and they finish like 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever it is. And they're completely exhausted because they've worked through the heat of the day. Or they've got stuck in peak hour traffic. All these problems arise from it. And then they come home, they have their dinner, they want to relax, they want to have their own time to themselves again. And so they end up staying up late again and trying to get their own sense of freedom and sense of time back. So they start watching their Netflix and going through their Facebook and all the rest of it. And all of a sudden they realize they're up until midnight again or 1 a.m. again. And then, and then they're like, all right, now I've got to go to sleep. And then you've just messed up the routine for the next day again, because again, you're now going to sleep an 8-hour day, or maybe you're not going to get 8 hours. Maybe you have less sleep and you have 5 hours, but that's going to then drag on the whole way through. So I think having a set routine where you start early, make sure you have enough sleep, make sure you're eating the right food, and taking care of yourself is really, really important. I don't think enough people do it.
Mm. So Dan, before we finish up, besides the fact of saying thank you so much for being so abundant and telling us exactly what's been happening in your business, and congratulations to you. Like, when I heard your story at the Franchising Expo, I was just like, man, this guy's got it going on. Are you actually looking for any more franchisees? Do you have spaces for franchisees? If someone was listening to this and they went, hey, I want to jump on board Dan's team, do you actually have some spaces? You're not sold out yet?
No, we're not sold out yet, and I think that's because I keep on buying more and more areas around us. So, yeah, what is it? The is now called Northern and Eastern Australia. So 6 areas that I bought, they're all merged into the one region. So we do have plenty of space. So if anyone does want to sign up, all you got to do is call 131-546 to be able to get in contact with the gym's call center, and they'll put you through to me. So, but yeah, thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you so much for coming. And before we finish up, just want to remind everyone, if you want to add to the podcast, which is free, I also have the Franchisee Profit Pulse newsletter. So if you're interested in getting some more tips and hints on how to help and build your business, come over to just my website, traceyleak.com. You can sign up for that for free. But if you see this on social media, please make sure you give a comment and say thanks to Dan for sharing his story. Dan, you've done such a great job. And the funniest thing is when you talked about that, you weren't great at school, something that I have found really common with successful people is that school was not actually an indicator of whether or not they'd be successful. The number of people I talk to who go, I didn't do great at school, that doesn't mean you're going to be successful or not. It's about how you actually think, how you treat your customers. There was a lot in your story around customer service. So well done to you. And thanks so much for joining us. It's been a delight to talk to you as always. And make sure you pass on our thanks to Mel as well for all of her hard work and for being the person behind the scenes who's actually made sure that you've both become the success that you are.
Will do. Thank you so much, Tracey.
See you, Dan.
No worries. Bye.